Joining me now is Ted Gong. He's the founder and CEO of Washington's chapter of the Chinese American Citizens Alliance and the executive director of the 1882 Project. Ted, thank you for your time. Now, I've heard people describe DC as being defined by a black and white binary in terms of thinking about race. How do Asians add to the conversation and history of DC in terms of its diversity and ethnicity?
Well, I think one has to remember that Chinese, as well as other minorities, not just blacks and Americans, whites have been here since the founding of the Republic. Chinese have been here since 1850s or earlier.
And how does the history of Chinese and Koreans differ in DC in terms of if we're going to think about Asian Americans as one group or divide them up in terms of Chinese and Koreans? Could you give us a little bit of insight into what that history is like and how these communities have developed in different ways?
Well, I think when you think about Chinese Americans or Asian Americans coming to the United States, you tend to think about the population as it grew in the West Coast, California, Oregon, around there, along with the gold mines and the railroads. So think of those terms were there in large numbers. Chinese were there as early as the 1840s for the 1849 gold rush. But there's also a good group of Chinese that were here in the East Coast almost at the same time. We tend to think of those people in the West Coast coming over after the construction of the railroad or after the railroads, and then they move out here in gradual waves. There's also a large group of people who came here to Washington, D.C. and the East Coast, Qing Dynasty or other places like that. But there was also a significant number of people who came, not a huge number of people, but there were Chinese Americans that fought in the American Civil War, both the North and the South. And these people came over well before the Civil War started, probably as part of the Chinese U.S.-China trade.
Yeah, I find the history along the Mississippi Delta particularly interesting. What are you hoping to create in terms of this historical context statement? What kind of awareness are you hoping to spread to the wider public in the US?
Well, the context study for this one, Koreans and Chinese, is part of an Asian American context study. And context study referring to the Department of Interior trying to make sure that all Americans' history are properly recorded or properly noted, so that if we build monuments or we're looking to look at the consequences of construction in different places within the United States, anywhere, then we have some studies that tell us the importance of these places and that we can't just ignore them, because obviously all these places they're not well known. And so what we want to do is provide some explanation, explore some sites, let people know that there were Chinese or Koreans or other Asians here. And we want to explain what they were doing here so that we can provide some context for other people who might want to further research for monuments or for just historical understanding, or if they are going to build on or construct on the site, they know what they're building on and take considerations for that. I think it's very important. It's important for us to understand that American history is not just a white history of white Americans' manifest destiny moving from the East to the West, or of coming to terms with the African American story and that. So sure, those are very dominant stories for us, the black-white racial divide, but there is a huge amount of Asian contributions both throughout the United States, and both sides of the United States, North, East and West, and North and South.
All right, Ted, we'll have to leave it there for the time being. Really appreciate your insight. Ted Gong for us, founder and CEO of Washington's chapter of the Chinese American Citizens Alliance.